Okay, so hi everybody. Thanks for joining tonight. I'm excited to see so many of you were able to make it on this rainy evening. This is an exciting portion of our residency preparation series. I'm looking forward to hosting this panel about making the most out of your APPEs. We've got, it looks like quite a variety of students represented. We've got P1s, P2s, and P3s all in attendance. So I'm really excited that everyone is kind of looking ahead to their fourth year and looking at how you can really make the most out of that, that time in your pharmacy program. So the plan for tonight is we are going to have a kind of moderated panel. We have three panelists with us tonight. I know many of you probably know our three panelists in some way or another, but tonight they're all going to talk to you about their the ways that they interact with our fourth year advanced pharmacy practice experiences, or APPEs. We also call them your blocks, your rotations, and all three of them are going to be able to bring a really unique and kind of different perspective. So I think there's a lot to be learned tonight. So I know you all received emails from me letting you know who these three people are, but I will let you know again, and then I'm going to kind of call on each of them to maybe introduce themselves a little bit further and explain just a little bit more about what they do in depth. So first off, we have Dr. Juancho Ramirez, who you all know, you've interacted with him plenty, but Dr. Ramirez is our Associate Dean for Student Success and Experiential Education. So Dr. Ramirez, could you introduce yourself a little bit more and maybe just talk about what your role is with the fourth year rotations and APPEs?
Yeah, well, good evening, everyone. So for the purpose of our talk, I'll let you know my role, specific role, as we transition from the P3 year to the P4 year. I am your primary contact throughout your P4 year, throughout your experiential learning, and I basically help support the experiential office in terms of coordinating all your rotations. And you've experienced what that's like, lots of conversations, and really trying to be more precise in your scheduling in preparation for what is next for you immediately after you graduate. Along the way, I help advise students along with Eliza and Dr. Foster here on how to tackle pretty much A to Z, just life in general, to how do I build a relationship with my preceptor and how do I get a job? I mean, it's everything. So I do have many conversations with mostly P4s in my job. So I really enjoyed that part of my role. And I'll popcorn to Dr. Foster.
Yeah, I can introduce myself. So let's see here. So for you guys, probably what you'll want to know is I've worked with a lot of students over the years. I've worked at OHSU for, I always forget, what year is it? So it'll be 12 years this summer. So I've worked with a lot of students over the years and residents as well. And then for the last few years, I've kind of been doing more of the coordination piece and overseeing having like a bigger involvement in the bigger picture things that are going on with student rotations at OHSU. So I work with a lot of preceptors, and we've been working on developing rotations and setting up some new experiences for the students. If you're interested in pursuing residency, if you have, questions, like if you're thinking that far ahead, I've sat through residency interviews and interviewed many candidates. So I feel like I have a pretty good idea, and we have a program at OHSU where we work with students and kind of help prepare them for residency interviews and for residency life. So I have provide some insight into that, and yeah, help guide you guys on that path too. But that's probably the part that you most care about for me.
And then our third panelist is Enes Hanini, who is a P4 student wrapping up final year of the PharmD program. I will let you introduce yourself as well, Enes. Tell us a little bit about all the things that you've been involved in while you've been with us at the OSU College of Pharmacy, and then maybe tell us a little bit more in depth about some of the things you've been involved in specifically during your fourth year.
Hello, everyone. My name is Enes Hanini. I recognize some of you in here. For the ones who don't know me, hello. So student ambassador, as well as doing my PharmD MBA and working during the P4 year as well. So I can really provide some perspective to you in terms of how it's like to manage a job while doing APPE rotations, or the residency application process, and kind of what to look out for in your APPEs and how to prepare yourself for that as well. Some tips and tricks during your APPE rotations to be a successful student, how to develop a proper relationship or professional relationship with your preceptor as well, and still being involved in the things you want to be involved in. So please feel free to ask all those questions. If there's any PharmD MBA students in here as well who kind of want to know about that side of things in terms of how to manage your classes during P4 year, while also managing APPE rotations, I'm here to answer any questions you may have.
Great. Well, thank you all three for being here tonight. So as far as logistics for the evening, I did collect some questions via a survey ahead of time. So I do have those that we can use to start some conversation, but I do want to make sure that the participants who are here this evening as well get all of your questions answered. So feel free to type questions into the chat box. You can also raise your little virtual hand and I will call on you to ask your question. As you can see, we have a great wealth of knowledge available, and I'm sure we'll be able to get some great perspectives to answer all of your questions. So while those of you that are here are perhaps typing questions into the chat or finding your virtual hands to raise, I think maybe we can just start. One of the questions that we received ahead of time was, I think maybe a good place to start, which was, do you have just some general tips for each of the academic years of things that you would recommend for someone who's preparing to start their fourth year rotations? Are there any things that the PharmD students can leverage in their didactic coursework to help them be successful in their APPEs? Any tips or tricks that you've seen be really successful with students that you've interacted with, or for UNS in the past?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I do find myself referring to a lot of the course material throughout my rotations, extremely helpful. Me personally, I like to keep all my PowerPoints in an organized format. And I kind of divide them up by disease state. So that way, whenever me and my preceptor, whether if I'm in my internal medicine rotation, which requires you to be a jack of all trades, you'll kind of see all disease states in that rotation. You can quickly refer to these things. But, you know, guidelines and recommendations tend to change over time. So what you may have learned P1 year could be a little different from what you're actually going to see in practice. So take this time and opportunity to really look at the current guidelines, familiarize yourself with how to find these guidelines and recommendations, really practice your evidence-based medicine approach during these rotations. It's a perfect time to really develop these skills, so that way if you do, for example, plan on applying to a residency, you kind of have that tool in your toolkit already. Also, it's good to ask your preceptors in advance, is there anything I should brush up on before coming into your rotation? And they tend to tell you either, yeah, here are some of the most common disease states I'd like you to look at, or just, you know, we'll kind of figure it out as we go. So it just depends on the rotation itself and the nature of it. So yes, you can refer to your didactic material. I wouldn't necessarily try to review everything before going into APPE rotations. Each block is going to be a little different. Just have that communication with your preceptor, maybe 1 to 2 weeks in advance. Do a little quick review, watch some YouTube videos, and as I said, practice on your evidence-based approach throughout the APPE rotation as well, so you can come on the most up-to-date recommendations.
That's perfect. I have nothing to add now. Well, maybe I have a question actually, Ennis. Can you guess what the P3s are feeling right now?
A little bit of, oh, I'm so excited to be done with didactics. Par block is coming up. Oh my God, what am I gonna do? How am I gonna cram all this into these upcoming weeks? And then it's like, do they really expect me to know everything going into this? And the answer is no. No one expects you to know everything. They still look at you as a student that's learning. So it's okay not to know things. Don't worry about that. Coming into my first block, I was like, man, I wonder if they're gonna expect me to know everything. It's not necessarily the case, no. A good preceptor will really just go over the things that they want you to know and expect you to know. So don't be afraid of that. Don't be nervous. I know I was really nervous during this time of P3 year, so it's all okay. It's all gonna be just fine.
Yeah, a lot of nervousness right now in anticipation of really what is expected of you during the P4 year. And also knowing the fact that you have a diverse array of rotations. And although most of you have worked in pharmacies before, you've never really worked in internal medicine, you've never really worked in infectious disease or even transitional care or mail order, or, you know, you worked in a singular place before. And so now you're coming to the realization that, I don't know, I might not know what I'm doing, but I want to focus on really foundational knowledge and skills going into your P4 year is very important to understand in terms of what you know and what you don't know, and what you're confident in and what you're not. And the best way to do that is I'm going to share with you again, this is my favorite advice, is to get a resource book. And this is an old edition, it's in the 11th edition now. And this is your pharmacotherapy handbook, not the textbook. I like this because it's an easy way for students to test their knowledge and also to retain and simply memorize things that you need to know going into your rotations. And the table of contents and how this is displayed and delivered to you is by disorders. So you have cardiovascular versus dermatologic versus infectious disease. So just looking at infectious disease and the notes you have in infectious disease, it's all over the place because you have different lecturers. And so this is a one stop shop that you could take a look at. It's standardized. Each section is delivered the same way. And I'll just show you what I mean by that. So just gout, it always starts with clinical presentation, the diagnostic diagnosis definitions, and then it goes to the treatment, both pharmacologic and non-pharmacologic. And it also has all the algorithms that pharmacists and pharmacy students love to memorize because it's, you know, you want to visualize things. And it has the pharmacotherapy laid out for you and all the important things you need to know by each medication. So it's a good way to a good resource for you to both test your knowledge and to also relearn things that were presented in different parts of your curriculum. And that will give you some confidence going into your rotations a year, one block at a time. So, and if you do this starting now into your P4 year, it's also a good way to study for the boards.
I do want to say also for like specialized rotations, for example, oncology, right? Coming into the rotation, my preceptor really didn't expect me to know too much about it because what we learn in school is very introductory. And we're covering maybe a single oncology disease state in one day, you know. So when you come into these rotations with preceptors who have lots and lots of experience and have seen a lot of things, it could be different from what we learned. And also, they want to be able to teach you these specialized topics as well. And it varies from institution to institution as well. So there will be institutional protocols set in place, which would be a little different from what we learned in school, which are really based around the OHSU protocol. So just keep that in mind when you're going into practice, in these specialized ones, especially that you're really just a sponge that's there to learn for some of these specialized practices as well.
I agree with all those tips that they gave. I would taking a step back, if it's not your P3 year and if you're not getting ready to go into your APPE rotations, some other tips you could think about are just kind of shifting your mindset when you're in pharmacy school. Like, it's hard, you're so used to getting the grades, and grades matter, but really it's about learning the information, because you're going to build, like, the pharmacy school is built to build every year. And so by the time you get into rotations, it's just another level of building on the knowledge that you've already gained. So just be thinking about that. It's not about getting an A, it's about learning the information, and preceptors can tell when it's just you got good grades on tests versus when you actually like processed and learned the information. And absolutely, your notes are fantastic. It's a good place to start, but they get outdated real quick. I don't even have my notes from pharmacy school anymore. Like, it's useless. So just be aware of that. And I think it's a hard thing to shift because you're so ingrained in like earning an A. That's what you want, or B or C, whatever it is. But I think there's more to it while you're in pharmacy school.
So shifting the conversation a little future thinking toward maybe that end goal being residency. What are some experiences that you would recommend students seek out during their APPE experiences that residency programs are really going to value?
That's a great question. I'll give kind of the student perspective and how I kind of approached it. So every time I started a rotation, because I knew residency was going to be my goal, I communicated that very clearly with my preceptor and really told them, you know, treat me like as if you would treat a resident. So I kind of asked for the challenge in advance just so I can get a feel of how the resident life is going to be. So that's the first thing. Secondly, you kind of want to learn, what does a pharmacist do in this setting? We don't really see that kind of work as a student. So learning what a pharmacist really does in their practice setting, whatever setting you're in, right? So down from verification order, what is their thought process behind things? How do they make sure everything is correct? Just really learning the role of the pharmacist is important. Topic discussions and journal clubs, ask for those. You're going to get a lot of those in residency, really. If you see that you have the time to do it during your rotation, ask for it as a project. One will kind of put you out of your comfort zone a little bit. Maybe at this point you're already comfortable, but it'll help you really develop those evidence-based approaches as well, and brush up on certain disease states that you may want to brush up on. Let's see what else. I used it as an advantage to buff up my CV as well. So P3 year is pretty much done. There's only so much you can do now to add to your CV, and that's all going to be coming from your rotation experiences. So when you're creating your CV, there's actually an APPE section, and then you list the rotation you did and what you did during that rotation under each one, under each section. So you want to seek out things that will make you kind of stand out when you're applying to residencies. They're going to look at these things. They're going to see what kind of experiences you sought out during your rotations. And I really think if you take those proactive steps to challenge yourself, it's really going to set you apart from everyone else as well. So those are some things to keep in mind when you're going into APPE rotations to prepare yourself for a residency as well. And I want to end it by saying that you're going to need some letter of recommendations. So make sure to really take the time to put into working with your preceptor and developing that relationship, so that if you do need a letter of recommendation, you can go to your preceptor and they can vouch for your skills or really your work ethic, etc.
So part of my job also is to understand what the market really needs in terms of pharmacists and pharmacist skills. And one way to do that is obviously to speaking with pharmacy directors or chiefs of pharmacy, people who are hiring people and actually molding pharmacy practice to its next future state. And so we need to be ahead of that. So just last night, I'm lucky that I have a great job and something that I've enjoyed doing. And along the way, I've gathered friends and friends of mine. We went out last night and we talked pharmacy usually and the future of pharmacy. And these are pharmacy directors in the Portland area. And there is a movement now that health systems are now looking at soft skills that pharmacy students have upon graduation. And they're noticing that pharmacy schools are really great at preparing students to present themselves in a really professional way, but what they really want is someone who's really authentic and someone who they could have a great relationship with for a year or longer. And so they're pivoting the way they're interviewing in the past year, especially this year, and trying to get to who you are. And so that's my advice to you, is getting experiences to really test yourself personally, to grow personally as a professional, and your ability to be authentic and how to relate with other people as a team member. So as a student, right now you're really concerned about making your CV look great and gathering all those artifacts that you could put in the CV. And most of the time it's really hard to present how you relate to other people. And so that's during the interview though. So when you get into the interview process, most of the questions that a big chunk of the questions that you will experience and have to answer is trying to dig deep into who you are and why you want to do this, and if you're going to be a good fit for their environment and culture. So challenge yourself during next year, whatever that is for you, P4, P3, and gathering more experiences that allow you to be part of a team and build those relationships with people that you don't know, and have many experiences with a diverse array of personality and people.
Yeah, I think I, again, agree with all of that. I would say, so one thing to always remember is pharmacy is a very small world. And I think Dr. Ramirez's point right there, where he gets together frequently with some of the program directors and talks about how things are going in pharmacy. So it's a small world. So just keep that in mind when you're on these rotations, that like it's like a long interview. And even if you are thinking about residency, not at the site that you're doing a rotation with, that doesn't mean that a site that you are interested isn't going to hear about how your attitude is and how you're functioning on your APPE rotation. So just keep that in mind, that every rotation is like an interview. And I think it's important to be helpful and to be a team player, as Dr. Ramirez was saying. And I think one thing we've noticed with students the last couple of years with COVID and staff, like everyone's feeling it, is it's so important to be flexible, and not everyone's going to have the experience that they dreamed that they were going to have every single day on a rotation. So your experience might look a little bit different. But I think what preceptors are going to remember are about how you responded to that and welcomed that challenge and that opportunity, and was able to grow during the rotation experience. And that's what they're going to remember. So just keep that in mind as you're kind of going into your APPE year. And then if you are feeling panicky about how you don't have enough check boxes for things for residency, you do still have some time in your rotations going up to that. So just be looking for those little opportunities to continue to build on them. And I think like some things that I like seeing on student CVs are like if they had an opportunity to do like an in-service to like nurses or like a medical team, that's cool. Even if it's like a 15-minute Pearl, like I think it's a great opportunity for you to get experience teaching to people outside of the pharmacy department and help building those relationships. And I think that's something that not everybody gets an opportunity to do. So just keep an eye out for those little things that seem really small, and it may not seem like a big deal, but I think that those sorts of experiences will kind of stand out because everyone has on their CVs. Like it's great. Like you want to have these experiences where you're rounding with the team and you're doing case presentations. Everyone's going to have that on their CV though. So we're looking for some kind of different experiences that'll help you to stand out or are always good, and things that interest you, right? So like what Dr. Ramirez was saying about how that it's hard to get to know people because it's very cookie cutter. So when you look at a CV, the more experiences that you have that kind of portray who you are and what you're about will kind of help you to find a program that's going to be a good match for you. So it's kind of both ways. It's not going to be like a cookie cutter match for the residency programs. Every program's a little bit different, and there's going to be a good fit for everyone.
Great. I'll pause my questions for a moment and just see if there are any questions from the students. I mean, my questions are also student questions. They were just pre-collected via the survey. Well, this question does actually go off of a comment that you made, Enes, but I think maybe I'll have Dr. Foster, if you want to start. The question is actually what is the best way to approach a preceptor for a letter of recommendation? And I'm wondering if maybe you can talk a little bit about letters of recommendation in general and building those relationships, and if you have any tips from your preceptor perspective, and then maybe Enes, you can jump in and talk to us about how you did that this year with your letters of recommendation.
Yeah, so it's always tricky. Well, it's not super tricky. Everyone manages it, so you'll manage it too, I'd say. But so one thing, like when you go into your rotations, when you start the rotation, hopefully your preceptor will sit down with you on day one or the first couple days of rotation and talk to you about your goals, like what you're looking to do, learn a little bit about you, set some goals for the rotation. And then if that doesn't happen, then as a student, maybe you can kind of ask if you can do that. So when you're thinking about letters of recommendation, you want to think about what the experience is like with a preceptor. So when you have that conversation, I'd probably recommend that you share that you're interested in pursuing residency, and kind of if you have interest areas, that's great to share. If you aren't sure what you want to do after the PGY 1 year, then that's fine. You don't need to have that decided yet. Most students don't or change their mind frequently, so it's not a problem. But I would just lay that expectations to kind of have that mindset of that's what you're about and that's your kind of the career path that you're headed down. And then I would see how the rotation goes. So I would give it a few weeks, see how the relationship's going with the preceptor. And if you feel like the rotation's going well and you have a positive rapport with the preceptor, then maybe about the midpoint, I would probably recommend kind of having a conversation with them to get their thoughts on if they would highly recommend you for residency. And I think the important thing is for residency letters of rec, you want to make sure they're going to highly recommend you. If there is a little bit of hesitation or if they kind of give you an answer that isn't straightforward, then I would kind of think about rethink if maybe that's going to be a good, the best letter for you, I guess is what I would say. So I think just having the conversation, like I said, see how the rotation's going. If you feel like they're going to give you a positive letter, I would probably do it about the midpoint and not wait till the very end of the rotation. That also helps the preceptor to think about specific examples they can give in the letter of recommendation about interactions that you've had. And if hopefully they're honest with you, if they aren't going to write you a good letter, then I would move on to the next rotation. The other thing to think about is those letters of recommendation take a very long time to complete. So if you know that most of the programs are going to need those submitted by the end of December. So you really need to kind of have that figured out before you go to mid-year, so that that's on their radar, so that they can be working on the letters of recommendation. We have a lot of students who kind of wait, like some preceptors at OHSU give a minimum. It has to be a minimum of 4 weeks before the deadline for the program. So just keep that in mind, that you need to be kind of thinking ahead for those letters of rec.
Yeah, I would say Dr. Foster definitely hit on all the important points there. From a student perspective, I did exactly what she said. Just pretty much when we had our initial sit down, I told them my interest in pursuing residency and that I would potentially be seeking a letter of recommendation. Some preceptors were proactive about it and gave me additional tasks to kind of make me earn that letter of recommendation, which was completely fine. And it, at midpoint, I followed up and asked them, do you think you'll be able to write me a strong letter of recommendation? So that's just really an important communication piece. I also told them when the time comes, I will remind you about the letter of recommendation. So the first day that applications opened, I already knew who I wanted to ask and identified them, and I sent them a follow-up email or a reminder email and told them residency applications just opened today. I'll be sending you, are you still okay with writing me a letter of recommendation? Once they said yes, I sent them the link and just took it from there. So just really be proactive, don't procrastinate till the end. Communication is key. And the preceptors are there to teach you and really be there for you. So don't be afraid to ask for things.
Yeah, I'll come at from probably a different angle. I do write letters of recommendations, and I love doing them for students who I know really well. To me, that's an easy letter to write, especially if I have recent memory of things that I could highlight about their skill set, personality, character, et cetera, et cetera. So those are easy letters to write. The question is, how do you know if the preceptor is going to write you a strong letter? One place to start is really just yourself. I challenge you to just write your longitudinal goal. And if you're able to write that and you're specific in how you're going to achieve those goals, that's great. Then that's how you're going to approach each rotation with that focus. But if you're not able to do that at this point, then it'll be hard for your preceptors to see that from your actions and your behavior, because you're not articulating that, you're not showing that to your preceptors. So preceptors like to see very specific behaviors and actions that leads to something. In other words, being wishy-washy and unsure, it's hard. It's hard for preceptors to be on your team. And really, when you ask them to write a letter of recommendation for yourself, you're asking them to be part of your team and to vouch for you. So again, I'm coming at from a very different angle and challenging you to write that letter for yourself first, to yourself, to see if you have that longitudinal passion that you could write right now. And if it's not, that's okay. I mean, that's something you need to find out for yourself.
I do want to say a few more things actually that I forgot to mention. One, make sure to look at the program's websites too. They sometimes ask for very specific letter of recommendations, so be aware of that. Don't wait till November to start looking at what programs you want to apply to. I started around August. You can go to the ASHP website. They have basically a database of all the residency programs, and you're able to look at all the programs in the entire US. So utilize that early, kind of have the programs on your radar a little early in P4 year. Look at the required letter of recommendations from the program. Some of them will even go as far as saying you need to do specific rotations to even think about applying to the program. So for example, like a children's hospital, if you're interested in pediatrics, they'll require a pediatric rotation along with a pediatric letter of recommendation from a preceptor. So look at those. Some of them will even say, make sure they leave comments in certain boxes, so bringing that up to the attention of the preceptor as well. Don't be afraid to be selective in your letter of recommendations as well. For example, if you have a community rotation and then a hospital rotation, you're applying for a clinical residency, try to maybe ask the clinical preceptor, for their letter of recommendation. But if you're applying for a community residency, it might make more sense to ask your community preceptor. So these are just little things to kind of keep in mind when you're applying care, managed care, et cetera, et cetera. Try to line up your letter of recommendation with the kind of program you're really applying to as well.
Thanks for sharing, Eliza. I saw that link. I was just going to share too. We keep saying letters of recommendation, but it's actually a form.
Yeah.
And like people are moving away from a letter of recommendation, which is kind of the older way of doing it. And so it's like a form.
Yeah,
So
it's like a form with check boxes and a few comment boxes, not an actual letter. So I think that's a little more convenient for preceptors as well. And the way you do it is I don't know if you guys remember Pharmcast, which is how we applied to pharmacy school. Forecast is what we use for residency. It's like the same thing basically. So everything's going to be through that portal. The link is going to be sent through that portal. You upload everything to that portal. Once you hit send, it sends to all the programs you listed. One more tidbit about letter of recommendations. You can ask for 4, 5, 6. That's okay. You can actually keep them stored, and you can select usually which letter of recommendations will go to which program. So you have the luxury of doing that when applying for residencies, just as an FYI.
I know we've talked about letters of recommendation quite a bit, but I actually do have one tip for those of you who are going to ask preceptors. I served as a reference for somebody this year, and so that form that I just sent you is the form that every reference needs to complete. And the student who asked me to be a reference actually completed this form for me with bullet points. So she didn't write it for me, but put in bullet points of our kind of interactions and how I might be able to speak to our kind of relationship and to her skills and to her abilities in all of those different boxes based on how I knew her and knew her experiences. And that made me writing her reference, it made it much easier, because even though these boxes look small, it actually ends up being much more writing than a letter would be. And so I actually would disagree with you there, Ennis. I don't think it's easier than a letter, because you have to write to all of those different categories, and you can see it's quite a lengthy character count. And so if you can help out your reference by definitely including a CV, maybe including your letter of intent that you've written, and also then
strengths and weaknesses.
Maybe giving strengths and weaknesses, and speaking to prior experiences that you've had with that preceptor, maybe jogging their memory about your rotation that you had, especially if it was block 1, reminding them about projects you've worked on, presentations that you gave, and then especially highlighting strengths that you think you have and areas of growth, because that can help them write about those things. And it can also kind of lead them to the things that you want them to focus on. So you have a little bit more control over the letter.
Yeah, that kind of jogged my memory. Each person who wrote my letter of recommendation did ask for that information. They said, just send us whatever you can to help us write this letter of rec. So just echoing what Eliza said, maybe include all of that in your draft email to the preceptor or to the person writing your letter of recommendation. And also, in terms of just hopping back a little bit, in terms of how APPEs can benefit you for residencies, if you don't know what your strengths and weaknesses are also, preceptors can kind of help you identify those areas. I was fortunate enough to be able to recognize a lot of areas of improvement during my time as an APPE student. So just keeping that in mind if you don't know what your strengths or weaknesses are, or have a hard time coming up with those kind of things. APPE year is really the year you'll find out.
Okay, so moving on a little bit, this will help in several ways, but we did get a question. Someone wants to know, how would you recommend documenting your experiences throughout your APPEs? And this would also help before your APPEs as well, I'm sure. And what types of experiences should students be documenting and keeping track of?
I can answer that since I'm doing it right now. eValue is one of them, definitely. So you'll have some things to fill out on eValue, and you can actually download a report and see the things you've documented. I've created a folder for each one of my rotations on Google Drive. So we'll say block 1, X, Y, and Z, block 2, X, Y, and Z. And then I go in there and I store all my topic discussions in there. I put in any protocols or necessary information that my preceptor may have sent me into that folder. Just make sure the institution's okay with that, because some institutions may not allow you to save that information. My journal clubs, and then I have a running document as well in terms of cool things. I always carry a notebook around with me, and I have little sticky notes that divide it up into block 1, block 2, block 3, block 4. So that helps me a lot to just write things down on the fly on them. So those are the things I would recommend documenting. Anything you think they'll be vital to your learning or help you really succeed in your role, go ahead and save it, as well as, and stay on top of your CV. Each block, revisit your CV and add what you learned in that rotation or the things you did in your rotation directly into your CV. Because if you wait till the end and you have to reflect back on like 5 rotations, you're going to forget a lot of the things that you did. So just keeping that in mind and really being proactive.
I don't really have a whole lot to add to that. I don't know about the eValue documentation part of it. From like a useful standpoint, like especially if you're going to go into residency and or just straight into practice, I like the idea, like if you're developing handouts for topic discussions you're already doing, if you're going into residency, there's a good chance you're going to have the same topic discussion the next year, and you can just add to the document that you created as an APPE student. It'll make your life way easier. So definitely keep that stuff. And if you've got the time to put something together, whether it's required or not, like I would do it because it'll just make your life so much easier, and you can just keep building to it and updating it as you progress. And then when you're a preceptor and you're having those topic discussions, you'll still have that like whole database of handouts of topic discussions and things. So it's worth it. Save all the things that you've put together.
Yeah, no, all those plus maybe it's another suggestion is students tend to really be focused on pharmacotherapy and the interventions and patient care type activities, and they're very heavy in documenting those and arranging it so they could present that eventually. And Dr. Foster added just artifacts of your work, the quality of your work is one. And then the third thing is really documenting your personal growth. And those are the reflection pieces that we ask you to write from P1 year, you know, from co-curricular to APPEs. All those things, it's not really for us, it's really for you to keep as well, so that you could reflect on it, especially as you get into your P4 year, the middle of your P4 year, and then when you're about to present yourself to future employers, you're a very different person from P1 year, and you're going to be a very different person from P3 to P4 year. I guarantee you. I see it all the time. And again, back to my original comment about what's really important now moving forward is institutions visualizing how you're going to fit into their system and their team. And the knowledge, yeah, that needs to be there. The skill set needs to be there. And really, I think that secret ingredient for the future is going to be your attitude and your behavior. and how you're able to explain and present yourself that in that way. They want someone who has an open mindset, who could learn and take feedback, and you're able to put together maybe some documents for yourself to remind yourself how much you have grown in those areas. That would be my suggestion to add on top of all the other suggestions.
I'll pause again here to see if there are questions that have come up from the Zoom attendants. Okay, we had a question that came in that has kind of a quick answer, but I think I'll expand it. So someone wanted to know if residencies could be pursued after someone had already graduated. So say someone had graduated, been in their career for a while, and then decided later that they wanted to go to a residency. But then I think maybe if we can expand upon that answer and talk about if maybe anyone could speak to, maybe Dr. Foster or Dr. Ramirez speak to the career implications of that, or maybe why someone may want to do that, or if you've ever seen anyone be successful in pursuing that.
Yeah, absolutely. There's examples, recent times, and also just in my experience. So there are students who, for example, who didn't match out the first year after graduation, and then pursued it again the next year and were successful in doing that. There are pharmacists who, after 10 years of practicing, decided to pursue a residency, and there's examples of that. I think at OHSU, those two examples existed. So the one comment I want to add is that it's really relative. So if your 10-year, 5-year experience is in community as a pharmacist, and then you decided to pursue a PGY1 in inpatient hospital, it's going to be a very hard sell, unless I think that's probably environment and supply type of issues. So when right now there's a lot of candidates, then it's harder to break in. So yeah, that's the only thing I wanted to add in terms of waiting. It's just making sure that your experience is relative to the residency that you're going to be applying for in the future.
Yeah, and I mean, I agree. It's definitely possible. And then so everyone's biggest fear, if you want to do residency and you don't match, and then you enter the workforce directly, and then waiting the year to reapply, and you decide to reapply. The question, I think, from like who the interviewers like would be, what have you done in this last year to make you a stronger applicant from when you applied the last year? So what are the things like, and then how have you kept up with your clinical knowledge? And so thinking about if at all possible, can you if you want to get into a hospital residency program, can you get a job at a hospital, even if it's relief, to kind of keep into the hospital scene and participate in topic discussions and journal clubs? And what are the ways that you can stay involved? Is it for joining a professional organization and offering some CEs or something? Like how are you going to keep on top of continuing to do your own clinical knowledge development during the year that you aren't in residency? Because I think if you can do that, that's going to speak a lot to you and about your drive and about what you'd want to do. And that's probably what we would be looking for someone who's applying, who was working for a year, because they would really have to want to do it, right? Because that's a huge pay cut. That's like the biggest thing that's going to be hard to do after you've been working out in the real world for a while and making a pharmacist salary after being a student for so long. Like that's a big sacrifice to make. And then the longer you're in the workforce, the bigger the sacrifice that is, and the harder it is to keep up with all the clinical knowledge. It's a challenge. And so I think if you're not in it every day, the challenge is bigger. So just be thinking about those sorts of things, just realistically.
I don't have anything to add to this because I'm not too familiar with life beyond student life.
Okay, so we all know about Dr. Ramirez's pharmacotherapy book, but this question is asking for any additional supplemental support items or things, or just support in general that you all would suggest keeping on hand during APPEs. And yeah, just what things have you seen be valuable to students as they navigate their APPEs? That could, I'm assuming, be things like the pharmacotherapy book, or yeah, maybe I'll just leave that question open.
My best friends have been really package inserts for drugs, guidelines for the most part, up-to-date micromedics, lexicon. So those have been the best resources for me in terms of being able to locate things that I need to locate. So that's what I would suggest, really, just being familiar with how to use those resources and how to locate them.
I thought you were going to leave it just at your best friends. And I thought that was a really sweet answer. I thought that was a great answer. It's like,
Thank you.
oh, your best friends. That's good.
Yeah, best friends.
Yeah.
That was actually my answer. It's really your peers. Even when you graduate, that first year of having a license, no matter if you're going to be a resident or a non-resident, you're still a pharmacist. That first month is pretty scary. You're not going to sleep, to be honest. You're going to think, oh my God, did I make a mistake? That's always in your mind. But then your friends and your peers, you could always call them and really run through whatever's bothering you, and they know you the best. So to me, the students who really focus on their work and nothing else, they really struggle. They run out of energy pretty quickly. But students who have the resources in terms of human resources, then they're able to maintain their focus and get engaged and motivated, even as we get into winter term, block 6, block 7. Those are the tough months, and your resources are going to be your family and friends.
I agree with all those things. I struggle with ID still. So for ID things, I really like, well, Stanford Guide, obviously, and then the Johns Hopkins Antimicrobial Guide is very handy. So that's helps me out still on a daily basis.
Excellent. We got through all of the questions that were submitted to me ahead of time. So I think we can wrap up our last 5 minutes here with if each of you could maybe just provide some motivating words for our P3s who are about to start their APPEs. Maybe just kind of last pieces of advice that you would suggest for our students who are kind of thinking residency in the future, tips that you would suggest for them as they kind of start out on this APPE adventure.
I'll let Dr. Ramirez start with this one.
Boy, I mean, this is, yeah. It's a topic. It's a question that I answer many times, and it's all up to the person, really. So my one comment advice is really just enjoy the ride and have fun with it, and really find out why what is your passion in pharmacy, and that is the secret, I think, for pharmacists who end up happy with their careers, is they have figured out what their passion is, and it is going to be a process, and you should be okay with that.
I feel like there's so many things you could say. I mean, I would just I feel like I remember feeling really nervous going into APPE rotations. But I think just keep that perspective of, you're there to learn. No one's going to expect you to know everything. So you should be saying, I don't know some of the time. Maybe not all the time. Hopefully you actually do recall some of the things that you spent some time learning the last 3 years, and you will. I think you'll probably be surprised at how much you do remember. But it's okay if you don't know, or if it's like you can't quite pull the information. Like it takes a while to sort through everything and pull the bits of information out at the times that you need it. So just be open, and people want to work with someone who wants to learn. It's a lifelong skill. You're going to be like that as a pharmacist. Like I still was looking up things today about adult onset Still's disease. I had no idea. I learned some new medications today. So I think just be mindful of that. Like you're never going to know everything, and you shouldn't expect to. And really, it's a red flag from a preceptor perspective if a student walks in and is like, I know everything, because the preceptor is going to be like, I don't know everything. Like you've got a lot to learn if you think you know everything. So just be mindful of that and enjoy the experience. And it's a journey, and you got a long ways to go.
I'll end it by saying there's a light at the end of the tunnel. It's there, and you're almost there. You're done with that. You're almost done with didactics. Be really proud of how far you've come. I remember as an ambassador, just seeing you all come in to the school, to the College of Pharmacy. Now you're going off to par block, and then you're almost done. So from my perspective, I'm incredibly proud of all of you and how much you've all grown, really. And you should be proud of yourselves. APPEs is actually really fun. You learn a lot. You grow both professionally and personally. And really, I wish you all the best of luck. And I'm so happy for you, really.
Excellent. Well, I want to take the time to just thank all 3 of our panelists. I thought this was a wonderful conversation, and I really appreciated all of your advice. We can do the thank yous and the rounds of applause. Thank you for taking the time to be with our students tonight, and I hope you all have a wonderful evening. Happy week 9, everybody.